Thank you so much.
This is down.
Okay.
Change the slide.
All right, well, I'll go up. Oh, down to change. Okay, cool. So nobody knows what Huggingface is. And, I sort of created that talk for people who know what Huggingface is, and so to give you like a little bit about like news that you may not know about Huggingface. That's why I call the talk 15 things about Huggingface you probably didn't know. It's hard to read, but that's what it says. But if you don't know what Huggingface is, you can think of it as like open source machine learning. That's where the community shares and accesses models that are free to use to build any kind of machine learning application. So you mentioned NLP, and so that's dealing with text, what Hardik was talking about earlier, but that can also be about audio, about transcribing what I'm saying into text. That can be about images, creating images, etc. So yeah, open source machine learning. But now that you know that, here are 15 more things about Huggingface that probably you didn't know. And the first one is our mission as a company, which is to democratize good machine learning. And the way that we go about that is first through open source. I mentioned open source before. What that means in practice is open source code of models, the implementation of the models, but that also mean openly accessible data sets so that you can see what goes into training the model. That also means openly accessible model checkpoints. These are the files that you need in order to run the models. And that means open science, right? To publish how models are being created so that other scientists can build upon your work. So that's all that open source means for machine learning. Then the other thing is community driven. So I talked about community. Everything that we do at Huggingface is community driven. And then the third piece is do everything through ethics first principle. And speaking of ethics first, let me start with that. So number two. The number two thing is that what ethics in AI means for us is that we need to operationalize ethics. And what that means is that providing tools to the community of users, the community of researchers, so that they can build machine learning with ethics first principles. Thinking about ethics before you build things, not after. And so to do that, there's a wide variety of tools that our team puts together and makes available. And a great resource for that is our society and ethics page, where you can find lots of tools to measure bias in data sets, to see how models behave, to get best practices for everything you do in machine learning. So check that out. Number three. So Huggingface is actually one of the top open source companies in the world, like number 38 here on the as a GitHub organization in terms of number of GitHub stars. It's actually 36 today. I made that slide last week. And probably the open source library that you may be most familiar with is this Transformers library. That's how you can access all these models to do everything with NLP, audio, and image. But there's also much more. There's of course diffusers. If you've heard about stable diffusion, that's how you can use diffusion models. And then there's much more to build machine learning, from data sets to tokenizers, accelerate your trainings on multiple devices, optimum to make models faster, and so on. So open source machine learning. Number 4. So I talked about diffusers, and of course Huggingface is first known about transformers, but what's little known is that actually diffusers is growing faster than transformers. And transformers is probably the fastest open source project of all time. And so it's really cool in like the first few months of existence of the library that to see it grow so fast. So with diffusers, just like with transformers, you can use any kind of model And if you want to switch from one framework to another, PyTorch to TensorFlow, if you want to switch from one task to another, summarization, classification, if you want to switch from one model architecture to another, like from BERT to BART, etc., that's a very easy one line of code change. And what we did for transformers, we're also doing now for diffusion models. So if you want to go from one diffusion architecture to another, one modality to another, diffusers is the library to do it with an easy experience and fast results. Number 5. So when we talk about AI models, we often refer to these like foundational models. And the foundational models sort of paint this idea that there's only like a handful of models that really you can use to do anything. And we kind of offer the opposite view, which is that you can actually, there's the right model, there's the right tool for the job. And at Huggingface, we offer over 150,000 free and accessible models. And so you can go on huggingface.co and you can say, okay, I want to translate from German to English. I want to do classification for medical data. And you will find very easily the model that corresponds to that. One of the biggest things that happened in deep learning was the advent of transfer learning that came with transformers. And what transfer learning is the ability to take those pre-trained models that have been created using massive amounts of compute, millions of dollars of compute over gigantic corporate data. We talked about the entirety of the internet to create these very large models that are quite expensive to train and run. And what transfer learning is the ability to take those models and very efficiently adapt them to your use case, your customers, anything so that it works better for you. And so what that means is that we can all build upon each other's work, and so that's why we need to have a large variety to cover every single use case in the long tail. And so that's why we need to have so many models, and that's why the Hugging Face Hub is where you can find all of them. Number 6. So another thing that's not very well known is that actually most of the models that we host on Hugging Face are private models. So there are 150,000 free and publicly accessible models, but there's also over 150,000 models that we host privately for companies. And when you create a model repository on Hugging Face, it's just very much like creating a repository of code on GitHub. You can either do it publicly or you can do it privately, which is great to collaborate with teammates. And so we host over 300,000 models, actually. Number 7, there are actually over 1 million downloads of models every single day on Hugging Face. And I think that figure is actually a little bit old, but that gives you a sense of scale of the usage of the platform and why it's so important to have so many available free open source models out there. Number 8, so I talk about open source, and so people always ask me like, so okay, how do you guys make money, by the way? Great question, thank you. We make money by selling compute. So when you use the Hugging Face Hub, which is where you can find all those models I talked about, you can use inference endpoints to deploy them in production for your app. You can use AutoTrain to fine-tune them without any code. So all these paid services, compute that we sell on top of the hub. And then the other thing is we sell expert consulting services to help companies adopt and build with open source machine learning. Number 9, so I talked about 150,000 models. That sounds like a lot of work. I just want to build something. What do I do? And that's what the tasks experience is all about. So if you go on huggingface.co/tasks, you can just pick, say, summarization. And it's going to show you recommended models. And there's even a button there to create your own API for your own app to do summarization. So you don't have to be an expert in machine learning, have a PhD. You can use all this stuff and build great apps. Number 10. So what a day today, right? We had GPT-4 come out from OpenAI, Microsoft. We had Claude come out from Anthropic. We had the Palm model from Google to come be released as an API. So all these amazing new models, amazing new capabilities. One hitch though is like none of these things is open source. Like you can't really get the weights, you can't really run it on your computer, you cannot really run it on your data center. And so that's why it's very important for us, for our mission to democratize good machine learning, to provide alternatives. And so we're committed as an organization to provide open source alternative to state-of-the-art models. And we have multiple efforts ongoing to offer that to the community. So for instance, you may have heard of GitHub Copilot, which is built upon a code large language model, Codex. We're working in the open with ServiceNow to build through big code, great models and data sets accessible to the community to build code generation experiences. We talked about our Flamingo replication initiative. Flamingo is a multimodal large multimodal model, I should say. So it's kind of like GPT-4. So we're very excited to work on that. I think you're going to see like an explosion of open source models. There are multiple groups, and we work with most of them who are working precisely on that. And just like when Stable Diffusion came out as like an open source alternative to proprietary model with DALL-E 2, like you saw usage just like go through the roof, and everybody started playing around with it, building stuff with it. So I think the same thing is going to happen here for every kind of model. Number 11. So if you didn't know about Hugging Face, you probably didn't know about Bloom. Bloom is an open source model that came out of a collaboration that Hugging Face started called Big Science, where we wanted to get everybody to work together, everybody, all the leading scientists, all the leading organizations. I think it's the first time that we had like Microsoft, Google, NVIDIA, like everybody working together on the same project. And the output of it was, is Bloom, which is a 176 billion parameter large language model that was trained on massive amount of multilingual data, so it's actually very good at multilingual tasks. And if people know about Bloom, they probably don't know about Bloom Z, which is the instruction fine-tuned version of Bloom. So it's been taught to answer, to respond to instructions, which is what Hardik showed as like few shot, one shot, zero shot sort of experiences. So check out Bloom Z, 176 billion parameter, fully open source model to build great experiences. All right, so I talked about Stable Diffusion, which is really, really awesome to be creative, get some great inspiration to create images from text, but you should know about ControlNet. ControlNet is a way to control Stable Diffusion image generation by providing guidelines with either a little doodle that you can make, or a photo with like a pose, you want to replicate the pose, or a photo where you want to replicate sort of composition, or you want to use the depth information of a photo to control the generation, replace the cat by a dog, use the edges of an image to control the output. So it's really, really cool tool, and you can try it for free on Hugging Face using the ControlNet space. 13. Okay, if all that stuff is still too hard, we have a really, really fun experience. If you have a MacBook with a recent M-class chip, which is, there's an app for that. It's called the Diffusers app. It's a Mac app. You can get it on the App Store. It's free, and it's also open source if you want to make your own. And that enables you to play around with all the latest diffusion models. Just type a few words on your Mac, and your Mac actually renders the images. So you don't need a server, you don't need GPU, just a MacBook. 14, if you want to go deeper, if you want to learn about all this stuff, we have great courses online, that are free and accessible. This assumes that you know all about the Huggingface course, which covers everything transformers, but we also have a diffusion course that covers everything diffusion. And if you really want to go deep, we also have a reinforcement learning course if you want to learn reinforcement learning. So super excited about educating the community on all this great stuff. And last one. So if you're a developer, you're much more likely to be working in JavaScript than in Python. And we have a great library for you, which is Huggingface.js. It just came out, I think, a week ago. And it's a great client to bring machine learning models directly within your web application. The browser makes the call, you get the response, you have machine learning features in your web applications. So super excited about that. Okay, that's 15 things about Hugging Face that you probably didn't know. Everything there is like new from like the last few weeks. So yeah, if you have any questions, please come to me.
Thank you, Jeff.